Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Real Freedom Stories. And today we're going to be talking about leadership, building and growing businesses, CEOs, burnout, mistakes that people make along the way, hiring, you name it. We have a leadership operational expert here, Pat Mancuso, and we're so excited to have Pat be a part of the show. Just a quick bio about Pat. Highly recognized thought leader, entrepreneur, coach, consultant, launched multiple businesses, including a real estate brokerage that had 800 agents and nearly $1 billion in sales volume in less than 4 years, facilitated 30,000 coaching calls. You've worked events with 12,000 students in live classroom settings and 41,000 people in digital events. CEO of Mancuso Consulting Group. You utilize your proprietary system, RSTMM, which is recruit, select, train, manage, and motivate. And so just a wealth of wisdom. So Pat, we're so excited to have you on the show and excited to talk about leadership.
Well, Mike, thank you. And I feel exhausted after you've gone through that whole deal there. I've been very fortunate and had a lot of opportunities and a lot of learning opportunities. So I'm excited to be here today and share.
Let's just talk a little bit about the background stuff, kind of how you got to where you're at, how you got to those spots in leadership where you could make those large impacts with people.
Yeah. So, I've been very blessed in my journey, if you may. I went to college. I thought I wanted to be in accounting, and I quickly realized that I probably didn't have the right behavioral graph, if you may, for an accountant. And so that led me to real estate. Interestingly enough, I did my first internship. And as I was doing that internship for an accountant, one of the parts of that internship was for a real estate broker, for an entrepreneur who managed multifamily units. And that experience, I started out as a credit manager, so to speak, which is basically approving leases for renters. And that led me to becoming certified as a certified property manager and ultimately managing about 1,600 units of residential real estate in 6 states, very young, in my early 20s after college. And what happened, interestingly enough, was that led me to really getting excited about real estate. And the second kind of defining moment there was I was kind of burned out in that business, did that for 5 years. And the gentleman who sold me my first house back in 1987 came to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about selling real estate?" And my response to him was, "No benefits, no guaranteed pay. And no, I've never thought about selling real estate." And so he worked on me for about 6 months. And the thing that I'll never forget, Mike, about that is that when I came into real estate, one of the things I did understand from college and the entrepreneurs and the mentors I've been around was I was starting a business. I wasn't just getting a real estate license. I literally was starting a business. And so as a business owner, usually you have to have capital, and you either have it or you borrow it. And in my case, I borrowed it. I borrowed $18,000 back in 1991 from a family member so that I could come into real estate full-time, all in, run it as a business. And, really, I haven't looked back. I've had amazing opportunities along the way, which we'll probably talk about. But that's kind of where it started.
Yeah, it's interesting that that you took the money and went all in on real estate. Because in my background, building and growing teams over the last 6 or 7 years, I've learned more and more. It's like the farther I get into real estate, the more I realize part-time is so hard, and unless you have a specific plan to get into it full-time, you just don't get the momentum, and so that's where I feel like for those people, it's like, wait until the time is right in your life to make a full run at it. Because if, they say, if you try to chase 2 rabbits, you end up catching none. Right.
Right.
And
right.
So I think, for the people that I've seen that have been successful, it's the ones that are willing to jump in and then also burn the lifeboat too. Because otherwise, if you're trying to make a little bit of money here and a little bit of money over here, you're just not going to gain that momentum. Because there's a lot of success stories in real estate where you hit it right out of the gate, 20, 30, 40 closings your first year. And there's a lot of people that 4, 5, 6 closings, and you just do that. And until you can get over that hump, it's just tough to get that momentum to where you can go in full time.
Well, it's interesting. I was fortunate. I had a rental that I brought from the property management side into real estate. I sold that basically my first day in real estate, so to speak. But the real issue is, Mike, is that it's like, people, it's not a job, right? People come into real estate because they don't want a job, but it really is a job. If you think about, you go to work today, your employer is going to pay you something. And then when they pay you, they're going to expect that you do certain things to earn that pay. Well, real estate, the only difference is the employer is you, the boss is you, and you still have to do certain things to earn that pay. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, real estate is not like a Best Buy. Like, I go into Best Buy this afternoon, I give them money for a TV, they get the money, I get the TV. I do something in real estate, today to create a transaction, the real estate agent doesn't get paid 45, 60, 90 days from now. And that's one of the things that I don't think the industry does a good enough job of. It certainly didn't teach me that in the beginning, but I knew it inherently. And that's why I borrowed the money. So I didn't have to worry about, what if I don't have a closing for the 30, 60, 90 days. I was fortunate that I did. I was fortunate to be Rookie of the Year in one of the largest independent companies in the United States at the time. And, so it really was that foundation that needed to be built. And frankly, in the work that we do today with small to medium-sized businesses, CEOs, entrepreneurs, it's really the mistake that many of them make is not thinking like, what does it look like to own a business? What do I need to run a business successfully? And how do I build it?
And frankly, my background, I was an entrepreneurship major in college, and it took me 15 years to start my own business because I was scared, right? Like, I grew up with parents, we had the W-2 job, we had the benefits, we had the safe, stable income. And so for me, it was the mindset around, betting on myself and taking a risk. And it took me 15 years out of college to do that. I took a class in real estate in college, basically covered 2/3 of the licensure, piece that you needed. And I just decided, no, I don't want to do that. I want the safe, stable thing. And, I was in finance and operations, but yeah, it's taking that risk. But yeah, you're the boss, and you're also the janitor and everything in between.
You're everything. Absolutely.
So talk about then, okay, so you had your start, and how did things continue to kind of grow and continue to scale from there?
So, my first basically 10 years in real estate were with one of the largest independents in the country. It was Burnout Realty, formerly known as Burnout, and it was bought out by NRT Senden at the time. It was one of the first major acquisitions for them. The founders of the company sold it for $80 million, which was amazing at the time. My journey in that company for 10 years was a high profile leader, a young leader in the company. I went into leadership, which was awesome. It was a great experience. It helped me in building brokerages after that. However, I stepped out of that once the company was sold, and because I kind of saw what was going to happen, locally owned company, local owners, to national company, not national or not local owners anymore. So then I went back to building a real estate team. And in the last year that I sold full real estate with the business partner that I had, we did 180 units with 2 buyers agents and 1 admin. And at that time, building a real estate team was not what it is today. In fact, the book to build the team, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, wasn't written. Yet we were hanging around a lot of the right people, the right mentors. And so we built that business. And then I got introduced to Keller Williams concept very early on in the Keller Williams growth. When I joined Keller Williams, when we launched our first brokerage, there were 11,000 agents. In fact, in Minnesota, and you've got, obviously history here, Mike, we were referred to when we first launched as Sherwin-Williams, like, oh, you're the paint company, because, Keller Williams at the time was just a small company in Austin. And that was probably one of the best business decisions I've made in my journey, from the standpoint of, I got to launch brokerages. We started our first broker with 11 agents, and within 4 years, we went to 800 agents. We really put Keller Williams on the map in the Midwest, and that opportunity afforded me other opportunities within the Keller Williams University, being a regional director, and then being a bold coach for 11 years, and having the opportunity to go on the road and impact agents of all walks of life, if you may, from the brand new agent coming in to the top producing agent who wanted to build a team. And those experiences have really provided a lot of opportunities for us and where we are today.
There's lots of business opportunities out there, and you're fortunate to be in a position where you aligned with the right people, your business exploded and the brokerage exploded, and there's a lot of great things that come from that. There's lots of other stories too of people who take risks and partner with people, and it doesn't work out that well. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit, like kind of that decision when you decided, yes, this is a risk I'm worth taking. People don't even know what it is here in Minnesota. But yet I feel strongly enough that this is going to be the thing that's going to help launch my career to the next level.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit and kind of how you help make that decision.
Well, it's interesting because that decision actually crossed both sides of the spectrum you just referred to. So it was a great business decision at the time. And then the end result was we had some things that didn't quite work out the way that we had planned them to work out. So what I would say to you first is that one of the things I learned in that journey was it really matters who you get into business with. And it doesn't matter when things are going well. When it matters is when there's bumps in the road. It matters when push comes to shove. It matters as to who's going to stand behind you when maybe people are attacking you. And that was the biggest thing that I learned, is that we really didn't do a lot of that due diligence in the beginning. The group that came together, we came together because we had a common goal, and that was we didn't like our current brokerages. That was really the common goal. Yeah. And the common place to solve that goal was Keller Williams. We did a lot of due diligence. And at the time, Keller Williams was the place that would allow us to do that. But as we grew those businesses, and I, was the point person, I was the creator, I was the leader, I was the face. What I realized is that although the people that we were in business with were, nice people, there was nothing wrong with them. They just didn't have the same thinking as I did, and the same mindset around business as I did, and that showed up down the road. And cost me personally and others a lot of money. And so one of the things I've learned in my journey at KW, and I'm fortunate enough now to have the opportunity to do this on a daily basis, is there's a model that we brought into Keller Williams called Recruit, Select, Train, Manage, Motivate. And this was a proprietary system that KW had used, that Gary had used early in the mid 80s. To really get his company on track. And Mo Anderson was the CEO that was brought in to do that. And I just had the opportunity yesterday to interview Mo for a book that we're doing. And without that system, Keller Williams might not have survived. And that system, is really about, first of all, who are you? You got to know who you are as a leader. You can't lead others until you know who you are. And what I mean by that is, who are you behaviorally? Who are you from an attitude perspective? Who are you from successes and failures and all those opportunities? And then understanding human behavior, understanding putting the right people in the right positions for the right reasons is what allows companies to excel. Many companies don't have the process to actually do that. So that process after the fact would have probably allowed us to succeed at a higher level. And for me personally, that one door closing opened up other doors. So it's one of those things that's usually what happens. But I wouldn't be where I am today without that experience. And I wouldn't be where I am today without the experiences that followed that and the opportunities that followed that. So I think it's just really important, to understand, who you're getting into business with. And, a lot of people get into business with others because it's a convenience. And what I would tell you is don't do that. You might not think you can do it on your own. You might not think you don't have the money on your own, but there's always a place to find money. That's another thing that I learned. There's always a place to find money with a good concept, with a good business proposal. And, and so that's some of the things that I've learned along the way. Many others, and yet those are just the ones that come up from that journey.
And what I love about Keller Williams and is the systems, right? They've got a system. It's a proven thing. Instead of, as entrepreneurs, you often like to chase the shiny objects and wing it and go with your gut and that sort of thing. Yep. It's like, look, we have time-tested principles that we can lean on that will help us make better decisions and lower the risk and increase the opportunity for success. And, so many of us are guilty throughout times where you just try to make these quick decisions, right? Because we like to move fast. Mm-hmm. And we think like, oh, if I'm making quick decisions, we're good. We're plowing new ground. But it's also good to be reminded, stop, think about this for a minute. And I think too, with real estate teams, so many times people hire you if you have a license and a pulse,
Right.
because now my team is growing. And what you realize is they're representing your business. They're working with your clients and your database. And am I going to let this person essentially be in kind of a marriage type relationship with me after I just talked to them for 15 minutes and realize license check, pulse check. Okay, now you're on our team. And so what I love about the systems is it forces us to pause, slow down, make smart decisions, calculated decisions, not just gut instinct,
Well, and Mike, you're right. And I can just go to some examples where it certainly is about the systems. And I would even take this a higher level. It's really about the thinking, because you can have systems, and yet if the thinking doesn't align with the systems. So what I feel like Keller Williams has taught me over the years is how to think differently as a business owner, not just somebody in real estate. It really has taught me to think differently as a business owner. It's taught me to think differently as a parent, to think differently as a husband. And so, because everything starts with thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing when you talk about real estate teams is, I just did we call it an organizational assessment. We went and spent a day with a team down in Florida about 6 months ago. And this is $1 million GCI team. There's somebody that we coach. However, they needed some additional help. There were some things within the team that needed to be addressed. And the leader was smart enough to invest the money for us to come down and spend a day with their team. And that process created a model, a path forward to two things: allow the team to get more in alignment, because there was issues within the team that, although they had success, they weren't all on alignment. And then the strategy moving forward for the business owner to really go to that level where in 3 to 5 years, they can exit the business and be more of an investor versus just a doer, and then actually have a passive, income cash flow, if you may. So one of the things that's hard for team owners, particularly in real estate, is they're entrepreneurs. There's no roadmap. And we do it, if as an entrepreneur, we do it the way that we think we should do it, which will give us success, but it's not going to get us to where we need to get to. We're going to hit a ceiling at some point that we're going to need a system, a model, or a tool to get through, as Gary talks about in The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. You have to break through ceilings, and it's not just one ceiling, it's multiple ceilings. We launched our first business, we had to launch our second one, different dynamics, third one. And, each step along the way, when you're hiring and building a team, if you don't, and this is probably the most important thing I think people should take away, if you don't have a proprietary system that you can replicate, duplicate, that you understand yourself to hire, you're not going to be as successful as you could be otherwise. We're working with a SaaS company right now in Florida. They service real estate, the real estate industry. And they've made some significant mistakes along the way, both in investors they brought in, partners, so to speak, that they brought into the business, and then hires that they made. And they brought us in 1.5 years ago to help them. And, just the process of helping them make the right hires has allowed them to take their business from where it was to a higher level, to where, 2 years from now, they'll be a $10 million company. And right now they're about a $2 million company. So it's just real important. That's a big piece.
Yeah. And I think for, talking about the purposes of the podcast here, real freedom, building wealth, and kind of gaining time and financial freedom through real estate, a big part of that is recognizing I can't do it all by myself. And, and I think that's an initial purposeful point to think about is because I've been burned in the past. I've had these bad relationships, these things blow up. I'm just going to do it all myself, and I'm going to be successful and do it all on my own. Well, you realize that, when you're doing all that you can do and you can't do anymore, you're missing a person, right? And so that's where you have to find other people. And it doesn't have to be, there's a lot of very successful people in real estate that don't have these huge organizations. You might have a few great leverage pieces and some virtual assistants and admin help. You don't have to have a 25-piece orchestra here to make your life successful and hit your goals. But at the same time, you do have to recognize I need other people to get to for sure, the next ceiling of achievement, right? You're going to need to, from doing it all yourself to doing it with others, you've got to find some people that you can trust, rely on, and that can help leverage you to that next piece.
And I think, Mike, you're right. I do think, again, I've been in real estate since, 1987, a long time. Is I do think you're seeing a separation right now in the businesses. If you may have real estate agents, you're seeing the, large expansion teams, the Ben Kinney and Chris Suarez type of model with Place, and the Adam Hergenrother with Livian. And, you're seeing mega teams being built, taking additional market share because they can provide higher level service, provide a higher leverage. Now, it doesn't mean they always do, and yet those organizations I just mentioned do. And yet an individual agent, even with some support, is going to hit a ceiling where they can only do so many transactions because there just isn't enough time there is for all the things that need to be done. So, the struggle entrepreneurs have is they don't want to let go of it. They don't think somebody else can do it as good as them. And frankly, there's a lot of things people could do better than them. And when they come to that realization, that'll allow them to break through that ceiling. And that's just getting to know who you are. It goes back again to many. I know I, as an entrepreneur, was never talked to, sat down, or explained my behavior. In fact, most of my life, I was told my behavior was negative. Like, oh my gosh, Pat, you're so aggressive. Like, you're so aggressive. And I took that on as a negative. And until somebody, sat down with me and told me, behavioral assessed me, and then explained it to me, I never realized I took on the fact that that was negative, and it was actually wasn't negative, nor was it positive, by the way. It's just a behavior that in certain roles is really, really beneficial. And I just needed to understand that. And once entrepreneurs understand who they are and then how behavior works, they get their lives change if they follow models to do that. And that's what we do with companies and part of what we do today.
Yeah. And one of the things that I understood, going through those behavior profiles is I'm such a high SC, and I tell people it is like the iceberg. I think things through so much. And when I finally do bring it to the surface, it's like, I'm not talking, I had a good friend of mine in my previous job where she talked to process through it. And I'm like, why are you asking me these questions? Why haven't you spent 5 hours thinking through your possible solutions? And now I'm telling you my pre-crafted solution here for your validation. Right. And so I realized, like, that's one of the things about me that, yeah, it can be a positive, can be a negative. And what people sometimes see is when I do come out and I experience opposition, it comes out as a high D because I've thought this through so much. And I'm talking to you for validation. Now you're questioning it. Like, how dare you do that when I've spent 80% of my time, 90% of my time thinking about the thing below the surface, and now you're just seeing the little iceberg on the top of the water,
And that's understanding behavior, and that's understanding how to communicate with a behavior that is opposite of you or similar to you, or somewhere in between. And without knowing how to do that, it causes a lot of significant issues in organizations. And it's really empowering when you can do that.
We kind of want to touch on a few things, your behavior and your performance and how those can go hand in hand. And then talk about CEO burnout, because a lot of the people listening to this are entrepreneurs. They're CEOs of companies of different size.
Right.
And because of your wisdom and your experience in those areas, I'd love to just hear your impact, your thoughts on those things, because you're in it.
Yeah. So it's probably not going to be surprising. The reason that many CEOs struggle with being a CEO, and you could say burnout, you could say lack of success in what they're doing, whatever they struggle with, if you really all break it down, it goes back to people. Because if they're struggling with burnout, then they don't have the right people around them to be taking things off of their plate so that they can be in their zone. So we do a process with CEOs before we even take them on as clients, and we call it an exploratory interview and exploratory day, where we bring them to our conference room. And what we do is we actually spend a day with them just asking them questions. And one of the exercises we go through is we'll say, something like, so, hey, Mike, let's talk about all the things you do on a regular basis during a day. And we'll flip chart that out in our office and we'll put it up on the wall. And then I'll say, so Mike, circle the 5 of all these things that you reference, circle the 5 that you do most often during the day. So they'll circle the 5 that more often than not they're doing. Then we take a different color pen and we say, okay, let's circle the 5 that you really enjoy doing the most. Guess what? They're never the same. They're never the same. And the CEO looks at this flip chart up on the wall and they have this aha moment all of a sudden to go, oh, Now I understand why I'm not happy. Now I understand why my business isn't performing. Now I understand why my relationships are struggling. And they look at, because there's always a cause and effect. And that's a lot of times what people don't see. It's so interesting. I share this, and I'm not going to name the name of the company, but I'm going through an experience as a consumer right now with a large national company of a product and a service that we bought. And I made a connection on LinkedIn with the CEO of this company. I mean, this is a huge brand. And I reached out to the CEO on LinkedIn, and surprisingly, he responded. And I think my line in the message was, we'll know if you care after reading this. That was the phrase. And so I got a response back from him, and that was 4 months ago, but we're dealing with an ongoing issue that hasn't been solved. And I keep attempting to tell the CEO as a consumer, the problem is you, because the people that you're leading are acting just like you are and not solving the problem. And that's a big blind spot. And until you get a CEO in a room where they don't have their phone on, they don't have their email on, and you basically, I use the word dress them down, you basically get them to uncover everything. And when they do that, it allows them to really have freedom from a time that they probably have never had it before. Because they're so engaged in the business that, frankly, a lot of them never take a step back from the business. They never can see the business from a perspective that I can see it as a third party. And some of this stuff is so obvious as a consultant that when you actually have that opportunity to give them that freedom to step away from their business for a couple of days, and you ask them questions that no one has ever asked them before, it just totally changes their perspective as a CEO and a business owner. And now the issue is, it's first you have the awareness. Now the issue is what am I going to do? And this all goes back to people, because the only way that you're going to fix these things is through people, and either through people in the right positions doing the right things, or coaching people who are in the right positions to do and think differently to do the right things. It always comes back to people. It starts with people. I knew that's surprising. I knew you're probably looking for a different answer. But if you start with the people, everything else will fall into place.
So if you've come to the conclusion, let's say you've got a business right now, and you're questioning maybe whether the people are the right people or whether they're in the right seats, what are some steps that they can take to kind of start through that process?
The first question is, what is my process to determine if they're the right people for the role? Like, you have to have a process. Doesn't have to be our process, but you have to have a process that's consistent, that's based upon some factual evidence, that's based upon some foundations. You have to determine if you have the right people. Now, by the way, they're all great people. Let's be clear. If you put an individual in a role and they're not performing, it's your fault as the CEO. This is what we tell CEOs, right? You put them there. You hired them. You put them there. Your organization put them there. So the first thing is to determine what is the process that you have inside your organization that you're utilizing, that everybody in the organization falls in line with, that everybody understands how it works, that everybody's on the same page. So if you don't have that, then you really have to get to that point first, because you can't fix anything that long-term is going to be a fix. So for example, let's say you don't have a proprietary hiring process that you're trained on, that you're versed on. Well, now you have to replace somebody. Well, now how do you do that? Well, you do it entrepreneurially. Well, what if that person doesn't work out? Well, then you do it entrepreneurially again. And how many times do you make this, mistake? And usually what happens, Mike, is that people always point the finger someplace else. They go, well, I hired Mike. He wasn't that good. Okay, well, you hired him. So before him not being that good, you hired him. So the finger's pointing at you. So that's the first step. The second step then is they have to identify how to fix it, which is in, our model is the second part. So we first focus on how do we teach organizations and entrepreneurs and leaders and CEOs to make the right hires. What's their process? What's behavioral matching? Do the due diligence on hiring somebody. Then once you make that right hire, then what is the next step to put them in a position to succeed? Real estate agents, respectfully, this is where they're incredibly guilty. If they make the first right decision somehow, some way with the system or not, let's say, well, now they bring the person in and they go, okay, well, here's your phone. Here's what you need to do today. You go create all the systems. You go create all the models. And now I get to go do what I want to do. And that's not how you train people effectively. One of the things that in the company, one of the companies that we're working with and we've been helping them hire is they've made some hires recently with folks that work for Tesla, work for Microsoft, work for Xfinity. These are large national worldwide brands. And one of the things that they said during the process was, both in the hiring process and now subsequently in the first 90 days of training, we've never ever had an experience like this with these large companies. And so it's not just enough to hire them. You got to train them. You got to empower them. You got to put them in a position to succeed in the first 30, 60, 90 days, because you never get that time back. The first day is never a first day again. So what's interesting is real estate, I say this respectfully, real estate agents historically don't treat that first day like it's never a first day again. So, and then beyond the 90 days is, how do you keep people motivated and inspired? How do you help them grow? It's one of the most common things in hiring you hear from people who are looking for a new opportunity is, I want to have an opportunity to grow. What's the future path within the organization? But again, if the CEO hasn't created that future path, if they're not out 1, 3, 5 years in their business, you can't share that with anybody you're trying to attract. And that's why teams see such high struggle, high turnover, because people want to be attracted to a culture. They want to be attracted to a vision moving forward, and they want to know where their opportunities are. And this is all fundamentally the things that we work with when we work with CEOs, or we work with the agent teams and mega teams. And I've been fortunate to have coached some of the top people in the real estate industry over the years. Names that are highly recognized, that are in multi-million-dollar companies, have created, just big things. What's interesting is I saw the vision of those folks when we were coaching them. I saw where they wanted to go. So it was real clear that they would get there. Hard to know how long and when, but there are a few people now who are, raising public funds for some of the things that they're doing that started off as real estate agents.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you can see, that's just, as you're talking about those things, I just, in my mind, see there's so many missed opportunities along the way. And yet at the same time, we always talk about the two best times to plant a tree, 20 years ago and today.
Right.
And so I think to encourage those folks that have looked up and said, gosh, Pat's just shining that mirror up right now, and I'm seeing all the things that, have gone wrong, things that I want to improve and all that. And now I'm realizing, I'm a huge cause of this.
Yes. I am the cause.
Yes. And I have to set myself up. I've got a lot of homework to do here. But the key, the encouragement here is you can right the ship. You can get things fixed. But at the same time, understanding people are important, and you're not going to succeed without those people.
Yeah. It really is. And one of the other things is, as a leader, you have a responsibility. If you're going to bring people in your organization, you have a responsibility to impact their lives. And if as a leader, you're not doing some of the things we're talking about, you're not impacting their lives positively, you're not providing a great experience for them. And I don't know where you were going to go, but I'll just kind of jump maybe a little bit and say, when you have that moment that you say, yeah, you know what, I know that I have more potential, which of course we all do. The first thing you have to do is you have to make a decision. You don't get into action and change it. I'm just going to, from a coaching consulting perspective, you don't just go take action. You have to make a decision that you want to do it differently. And until you make that decision and you're 100% committed to that decision, like we've met with CEOs over the years, I have in our consulting business, and we'll have them in our conference room, and they'll have the aha moment that they need to fix this. And one case in particular, I had a CEO of a very large local Midwest company. You would probably know the name because you're from the area. And that CEO sat in my conference room and knew they had an issue, knew that they needed to fix it, but they weren't willing to make the decision to do what was necessary to fix it. And 6 months later, they were bankrupt. And I'm talking a multi-unit organization that, was very visible and the bottom line is the CEO wasn't willing to make the decision that needed to be made to fix it. And so therefore that led him down a different path. So they got to make, if you're seeing yourself in the mirror, Mike, as you described, you're going, you know what, I really do see some of the things are resonating. The first thing you got to do is make a decision that I'm going to make a change. The second thing you got to do is make a 100% all-in commitment to that change. Now, you don't know what the change is going to be, but you got to make a commitment to the change. Then the third thing that I tell people they need to do is they need to get clarity. You need to understand what the issues are. And usually you can't do that yourself. Mm-hmm. I once heard this said, look in the mirror, and if you have problems, you see the problem.
Yeah. It's so funny when you're talking about this, Michael Jackson's song, I'm starting with the man in the mirror is what pops up. It's exactly that. And for those folks that love, extreme ownership, that kind of thing, it's you've got to start with yourself.
Yeah. The reason the company that I started and I was the leader of with other investors didn't work to the extent that we wanted it to, or that any of us expected to, was my fault. Like, I was the leader. I was leading. Mm-hmm. Now, were there other pieces that contribute that? Absolutely, positively. But if I don't look as a leader and say it starts with me, I'll never fix the problem. So once you got to have clarity of the problem. Now, once you ID the problem, now what are my potential remedies and solutions to fix it? And the problem is most people go for the quick fix because that's easier, it's less painful. Mm-hmm. And it's usually the wrong decision. Well, going back to this company that we met with, they were looking at two consultants, myself and another consultant, and the other consultant was within the industry they were in. I wasn't. Mm-hmm. So the other consultant led them down a path within the same industry, which was causing the same problems. And that's why they failed. Their solutions, because I talked with the CEO after the fact, their solutions were not the right solutions to fix the problem. So my perspective.
Well, and then too, I think about as well, if you try to make the quick fix, you're just going to be right back where you started 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever it is. And so you can either choose to do the work and do it right, or do the work and do it right sometime later.
Yeah. Mike, it's interesting that you say that. And I would agree with you. And I would offer this, mm-hmm. except when you go back and fix it later on, like you say, okay, well, you fix it now, or you fix it, you're right back where you were before. You're actually not. You're usually worse off than where you were before. You usually have more impact than where you were before. And that's what people don't understand.
I wish we had more time to be able to chat about this stuff. Fortunately, you have a podcast.
I do.
Where you can chat about this stuff too. So for people that, love what you're sharing, Pat, and want to learn more about you and what you're doing, how can they do that?
So, the first thing is our website, www.patmancuso.com. It's PATMANCUSO.com. That's where we have our consulting services, our coaching services, the things that we do for small to medium-sized businesses. Our podcast, which you can find at that site as well, is titled The Success Ascent. And on The Success Ascent, we interview entrepreneurs, CEOs of organizations, thought leaders. We've had some amazing guests, CEO of Keller Williams, Mo Anderson, who led the company in High Trajectory. We've had Steve Sims, thought leader, who hangs out with Richard Branson and Elon Musk. And, so there's just some real great people we've had on that show. And so that's the two places that they could get us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your wisdom, Pat. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you.